right. Hey everybody, I am Amy and I am all that stands in the way between you and happy hour, so I fully recognize that and the importance of getting through this quickly. But I do have a great deal of information and insight in the transformation that we made from going from a primarily on-premise company a year and a half ago, to one that's very cloud first. And that transformation is hard, and it's rewarding, and it's really interesting, and there are a lot of learnings that we got over the year that I'm excited to take you through. So if you were in the last session on how to manage your product manager, I am the person that Clinton warned you about. And fortunately, a lot of the lessons that he was talking about, a lot of the things that he was taking you through are things that we have learned and have worked through in the last year. So a little about me. Like I said, I told you I'm the VP of Product Management for Message Systems. We're now known as Spark Post. I'll take you through. I'm also a mom, so I have a 12-year-old and a 11-year-old and a 2-year-old, and so I never sleep, but I get by on a lot of Diet Coke and Diet Mountain Dew. But I'm really passionate about what we do. I'm really passionate about the customers that I talk to, and I try to go out and talk to them a lot. I'm also really passionate about, not being afraid to be dumb. So we were just talking about this up here around one of the things that I really am not concerned about is if I don't know something, I either say, hey, Alec, to our CEO or to president or any of the developers, can you explain that to me? Because I really don't understand what that means. And so that's really how I live and breathe product management. I talk to the customers, I talk to the market, and I try to figure out all the things that I don't know. So to tell you how we transformed, I want to give you a little bit of background on who we are. As I said, I work for Message Systems, but we're now known as Spark Post. The core product of Message Systems for the last, actually now more than 15 years, has been Momentum. Momentum is our on-premise, enterprise-level messaging platform that's really sold to high-volume messaging users or really complex messaging users. So you'll find Momentum in places like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Groupon, some of the biggest and most complex messaging centers in the world. April 15th of 2014, we made the decision as a company to be all in to going to cloud first. We didn't have any base in the cloud whatsoever. We had little domain experience in the company about what that meant and the different groups inside the organization that we would need to bring up to actually be cloud first. We'd spent the year or so beforehand developing Momentum to have the tool set inside of it to be able to support that from an API layer. But we didn't really know much else. We just knew that that was the place that we needed to get, and that we were committed to doing that. So April 15th, tax day, we made that decision. 1 year later, selected for multiple reasons. One, because we thought it would be really cool to say, look, we went from being all on-premise to cloud first within a year, and we did it. Within the span of the year, we went from being primarily focused on on-premise to being primarily focused on cloud first, having two offerings, both a public and a private cloud offering, both Spark Post and Spark Post Elite. Now that's our direction. We are cloud first, but we are not cloud only. And I'll talk through how some of the challenges have come about because we haven't abandoned our on-premise business. They are still very important to us in terms of revenue, as well as customer base and innovation and direction of the company. But we are cloud first when we go to the market. Those are the markets and the people that we are selling to. So when we decided to go cloud first, it's my charter as a product manager to say, who are the customers? What's the market? What's the need? What are the pains? What do people care about? And those things are very different in an on-premise world than they are in an on-premise world than they are in a cloud world. So in an on-premise world, you are dealing with people that really love messaging. They really love the infrastructure. They want to talk to you about all the different technology and the hardware and the tin and just different cores and all that stuff, which I'm not geeky enough to fully get into the deep details of those things, but I get, right? Enough to be able to push that market forward. And those people are very different than the market of people that some of you may know, a guy by the name of Mark Benioff, who says the cloud services companies of all sizes. It's for everyone. Right? That is very different than an on-premise product that is for the biggest senders in the world with the most complex messaging needs. I'll leave the cloud as a democracy since we're in Washington, D.C. for another day. Right? So when I looked at the market for the cloud, it's for everyone. It services all sizes. That's very different. The needs there are very, very different. And even still, in the cloud, it needs to be easy. You need to be able to snap your fingers and to be able to say, like, as a consumer of that cloud service, that I can just get up and running. Someone shouldn't have to explain it to me, and I shouldn't have to take weeks of training, right? I shouldn't have to really imbue this thing into my soul and become an expert at this product that you were delivering to me. It should just be so easy that, you know, small businesses, individual developers, all the way up to the enterprise can take your service and they can consume it and they can adopt it very, very quickly. That is instinctually very, very different than an on-premise world. And the entire organization had to recognize that and make that shift. Because when you are used to dealing with the customers who are very much ingrained in the experts in the messaging world, or any world that you're making this transition from, to going to a world where that's not their core competency. That's not the thing that they may care about the most. That may not be the thing that is most compelling and important to their business. So they just want to be able to plug and run. That is a very different mind shift, right? And the thing about Momentum is it's a really powerful toolkit. We have all of those customers, and we are able to send that 25% of the world's legitimate non-spam email through our systems because it is so powerful, because it has so many capabilities that you can use in different toolkits and things that you can script to do with it. You don't need any of that, and the market is not going to want any of that for the cloud. They just want to plug and run. There's also a ton of great benefits to a business, right, for going into the cloud. The first one is the flexibility to change. We are so particular about loving and holding dear our on-premise customers, as we should be, right? They spend a lot of money with us. They spend a lot of time with us. And they're pretty much committed to us. They make a decision about software licenses. They make a decision about the hardware that they're running on. They make a decision about training their people who are going to run it to run this software. So there isn't a lot of flexibility to change there. In a cloud-based world, absolutely there's the flexibility because you pride yourself on the ability to make it easy to transition from one to the other and then work on the things that make it sticky so that they stay. Automatic software updates. So one of the things that I do most in my role is talk to customers. I probably talk to between 5 and 7 a week. Some I'm visiting on site and some it's on a phone call. Last week, I had the chance to meet with one customer, and I always ask them, what version are you on of the software? How are things going? How is support? Just a general kind of questions to get a sense of how the typical company is running for them. And they said, oh yeah, we're not on the latest version, but we upgraded pretty recently, so I think we're all good. So I said, all right. They had noted that there was a support issue, that support couldn't answer a question for them. And they had asked some blanket, like, could you tell us any of the scenarios that might make this thing happen? And support hadn't come back to them yet. It had only been a couple days, but support hadn't come back to them yet. And so they wanted me to answer that question. And I said, well, I really need to know what version you're on. And they went back and they asked somebody else, and they came back and they said, we're on version 2.2. And I was like, are you effing kidding me? That was 7 years ago. That was before I even started here. And they were like, what do you mean? I mean, that was pretty recent, right? Like, that thing is end of life. And that is not an unusual story to talk to customers. That one is an absurd end of the story. But so many times on-premise customers are reticent to take the upgrades. Maybe they've had a bad experience. Maybe the processes in their company make it so hard and laborious for them to do it, or they're so risk-averse to take them in. But getting those updates, whether it's from a security standpoint or whether it's a bug fix or memory leak or whether it's a feature improvement is so important. And in the cloud, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about getting a team of people to find some time to be able to make those updates or worry about the rolling back if something goes wrong or worrying about do you have to provision additional servers to make it happen. That's all handled for you. That's not something that we had to worry about ourselves before because we'd never run a cloud service before. We'd only serviced it in an on-premise methodology. But for the customers that we wanted to service, this was a great benefit to them. Certainly reduced capital costs. You don't have to buy the hardware for it. There's no capital costs around that and the software costs associated with it. You can increase the productivity with fewer people. So one of the things I just talked about, right? You don't have to get IT involved in getting the hardware and taking the time to bring down systems and bring up new ones, right? All of that is automated. So really, you just get the benefit of using the system without all of the other details around it. Definitely increase collaboration and innovation. You get things faster, you get to use it and give feedback, and since we're updating more quickly, you get to figure out how the system works and to innovate and work with the team and the company to make it work better for you. And this one, less training required, is really, really important, right? Like, it should be pretty darn simple that you just can read the documentation and go. And that's certainly not the case for any enterprise-level software that I've ever seen, and certainly not the case for ours as well. So it seemed like a really, really great direction to go, especially because that's where the market was going. And at the same time, from our own sales cycles and from our own conversations with customers, even customers that had us on-prem, we knew that the direction was really going. The churn was really going to people saying, either there is a strategic initiative to move everything to the cloud, which many of our customers, even our on-premise customers, have said to us they are moving everything to the cloud. And even though they've spent all of this on hardware or licenses or whatever, they need to move to the cloud. Or new customers who say, I don't want to be troubled with running this myself. Whether it's a messaging system or whether it's anything else, that's the direction that's going. And so when we look at stats like this that say 44% annual growth is going to go to the cloud versus that paltry 8.9%. And then when we added that on top of the fact that we really service the high of the high market, right? We service those biggest senders, the highest volumes, the biggest complexity in the world, because they could handle it, because they had the technologists inside the company to be able to run those things. There's not a really great way to go down market there without really simplifying your system and taking away the power if you're going to do that on premise. So the direction for us, we said, you know what? April 15th of 2014, we are all in. We are playing leapfrog with a unicorn, and we do not care. We're going to ride it out, and we're going to really commit to making this change. Everyone in the company really committed to making that change. Right? And there's great benefits to us as well. We can go into new markets, monetize new markets and verticals. We can certainly go down market where we had trouble doing that in the past. There's partnerships and integrations that we could take on that we really weren't able to leverage well in the past with a lot of the other service providers in the market. So in an on-premise world, it's not as clear as the direction that you can have where you're playing with other PaaS or software as a service type applications out there, but when you're actually already in the cloud, that plug-and-play list becomes that much more available, and you can even go a little bit further down market. And then you can expand the verticals of people that you're talking to. So there was great benefit there for us as well. Another challenge is in innovation, and we said, it's great that I can go out and talk to customers, and that is my charter. And there's a couple other people in the organization that's their charter as well. But when you run your own service, you get your own data of what people are actually using and what they're not, whether they like something or whether they left. And you can track that back and say when and why. And that's much harder to do on an on-premise standpoint. And so we can be much more creative, much quicker, without the concerned risk of, we don't want to deploy this thing on-premise because it hasn't been hardened and it's not ready to go out into the ecosystem yet. All of those things are a little bit safer in a cloud environment. So we took that leap. And we were like, you know what, this cloud thing, it's effortless, right? It's really, really easy, right? Like, how hard could it be? If you look up cloud transformation, which clearly I did. So if you look up cloud transformation, you get these these really idyllic, it's just that simple. I'm just going to pick up this nice fluffy cloud, kind of like a day like today that you can look out the windows and overlook the harbor there and say, this is really simple. We're just going to make the decision. We're going to go for it, and operating in the cloud is super smooth. It has all these benefits, both to our customer as well as to ourselves. Just going to wipe away that on-premise-ness from our skin, and we're going to break out the clouds. This chick, she's about to walk up there, and she's like, hey, everything is cool. But in reality, it's a lot more like this. The cloud is extremely powerful, but it's going to throw up obstacles in your way, right? Has anybody old enough to, I think there's old enough, like Twister, 1996, this was an amazing movie. So, we've got more cows. So the truth is, it really is powerful. It can serve anyone from the smallest businesses to developers that are just starting out in angel hacks and hackathons and incubators all around the world. And that power doesn't just come from a soft, fluffy cloud. It doesn't come without some strife and without some challenges thrown into it, but it's what makes it really interesting. So how do we approach it? So we made the decision, we're all in. We're fans at Message Systems now, SparkPost, of saying, Viva SparkPost, we are all into making this change. And we really are. There's a lot of really excitement around making this change. So I like to start with the good stuff. What was the easy part? The easy part was saying, who are we and what is it that makes us exceptional? Right? We had 15 years of being the most powerful and having great feedback. And we knew that we needed to focus and have a clear and defined focus before we made this transition. It was also easy to say, who is our target market? Because we'd had opportunities in the past where we'd tried to adopt to just about anybody and just saturate all of the markets. We want all of the things, right? But in this case, we said, we're going to be really measured about this. We're making a huge transformation. So let's make sure that when we make that huge transformation that we have a defined goal in place. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The harder part was saying, how are we going to get there? Because there is no real roadmap for this, right? We set a deadline of when we wanted to make that happen, and then we set milestones. And then the interesting part is what we'll get to in a little bit. Setting the milestones and hitting them, and then what you do after that is the really difficult part of this. And then keeping up that momentum to transform, to remember that your old existing on-premise business is still there and you still want it to be there, was also really tricky. So, focus on who you are, right? SIMBA, remember who you are. And who we were is a company that was focused on messaging infrastructure. We are not a company that does full campaign management. So for any of you who play around with major ESPs or do drip marketing campaigns or campaign automation, that is not us. That is not our core competency. We did not want to try to do that at the same time that we were trying to transition our existing business and focus from scalability, flexibility, and reliability. Those are the things that get the Facebooks and the Twitters and the LinkedIns to want to do business with you. And we wanted people to know that that power was what was going to underpin their software in the cloud. So that was our focus. Everything that we did was focused on those things. And again, if you were in Clinton's talk earlier, there is a lot of pushback times between product or marketing or the business side of a company that says, I want more things, more visible things that I can talk to people about and show them flashy demos, right? But at the end of the day, we knew that this is who we were, and we had to prove out that that was extraordinarily important to people. So that's what we focused on. In terms of who we went after, we said, we really want this to be for developers and engineers. We have the highest of the high market. We want to go down market, and we want to prove out the fact that these APIs that we built into Momentum are just as easy and just as intuitive and just as powerful to the slide that I just talked about as we believe they to be. So everything that we do is focused on developers, engineers in the small to medium businesses, right? And everything that we do is going to be compelled straight to those markets and those verticals. Later on, we added some additional ones, but initially it was developers, developers, developers. That was a chant that we had over and over. Developers, developers, developers. If we thought we were going outside of that paradigm, we stuck to it. And that's where all of our focus from a research and development and design and developer, evangelist, all of that came from that focus. So that was the easy part. The hard part is setting milestones. In April 2014, as I mentioned, tax day, and we do lots of things on tax day, we decided to fly. This is when we had a leadership meeting, and it was really a decision of, we have a couple directions we can go here. And we can choose to go in all of the directions at the same time, or we could choose to go in any one of these directions. And what's really our end goal here? And our end goal has always been to bring scalable, reliable, powerful messaging infrastructure to people that need it to help them build their business. And so we said, okay, that's our end goal. How are we going to achieve that? And of all the things that we had laid out in front of us, and there was a handful of them, we said to do any of those really well, we have to be in the cloud first. And we're going to focus on one thing because it's really hard to multitask well, and it's really hard to multitask well for a long time. So we focused on the cloud. Everyone was in agreement, right? There was definitely open discussion, but at the end of the day, it was, yes, we are all committed to doing this thing. So a small team was created, And that small team was chartered with, get us something up and running by our user conference, which is in November. So we want to be live in November, beta at least. We laid out the milestones, with that being one of them, and just everybody was super excited, right? We started thinking, need branding, need names, need all these really exciting things, especially for this small team. But it hadn't really sunk in, like that's where we're going yet. So in July, we decided that that was going to be our alpha launch. We didn't care what got into the cloud in July. We just wanted something. So pick a stack, get something of ours up and running in that. It doesn't have to be pretty. It's certainly not going out to any customer base, not even for a beta, test this out. But just try, just get your feet wet and figure out what is AWS. Do we want to go AWS or there's some other way? And Alec is going to talk about that more tomorrow, about how we made certain decisions and where those things evolved from. But July was, from April to July, just get something working with that small team that we had brought together. In November, as I mentioned, we wanted to have a beta launch. We wanted to be able to talk about this at our user conference and really to disrupt the industry. There are competitors in our market that we certainly had a focus on, and we wanted to be able to really start stepping towards it and really start building a conversation about who we were. Because messaging isn't really that sexy, and when you're the messaging infrastructure provider for the biggest of the big, they don't really talk about you that much. We like to talk about them a lot when we are out talking with people, right? But they don't talk about you. And when you don't have a product that everyone can adopt, it's really hard to get a voice and a share of that market. So we needed to start to be able to talk about ourselves. And that was the goal in November. And if you remember, at the beginning, I said that we had 2 product lines. So we had a beta offering of our public cloud and also a beta offering of our private cloud launching at the same time. Those are 2 different markets with 2 different needs as well. So there was a lot of stuff going on. We'll go through some of the learnings there as well. The next milestone, and to be completely honest, this was supposed to be our GA launch. But we reset and said, we are not ready. We need to give technical operations time to put in the right monitoring, the right automation, so that we do not fall down and have our pants around our ankles the second we open the doors. And we took that time. It was a hard decision to make because no one ever likes to say, let's do the unsexy behind the scenes things, except for the people that are doing those. But it was the right decision because we put in a lot of protections in place for us that made us comfortable to be able to go GA. Then comes April of 2015, exactly 1 year to the day. We went generally available on both sparkpost.com and SparkPost Elite. 1 year from the day where we said we have no experience in the cloud whatsoever, we launched our products generally available. So let's talk about how we got there. The first one was really transformational. We had to collaborate. We had to build teams that weren't there before. People had to talk to each other that maybe had never thought to talk to each other before. And really, we had to listen to the feedback that we were getting, listen to the concerns that were coming in. We certainly had to know where you're starting, where you're going. And then we had to iterate and adapt. And that's really the success of how we got through here. So does anybody know what this is? No? All right. So this is Herndon Monument. You can find it about 30 miles east of here in the Naval Academy in Annapolis. So if you've never been to Annapolis, I strongly recommend you going. But Herndon Monument was erected in 1852. And it was as a thank you to Captain William Herndon for basically going down with his ship. They erected it, and now it is used at the end of every plebe summer, so the freshman year for the Naval Academy students. At the end of every year, before they can become technical midshipmen, they have to climb to the top of this monument together, this monument that's covered in grease, and it's 100 degrees out because it's late May, early June. And they have to work together to get their cap off of the top of the monument and replace it with the sophomore one. And when I think about this, it makes me think of what it's like in an on-premise world. There are a ton of people working together. Sometimes it's hard, sweaty work. Sometimes you're falling down. Sometimes it takes longer than ever. They grade these poor guys on how long it takes. So in 1972, it took them 30-some minutes. 1975, sorry. And in 1992, it took them 4.5 hours. And I think everyone here has been part of a project that felt like that 4.5 hour one where you're just like, I am done. Is this over? Like, this is not fun anymore. Screw it. Like, let's get out of here, right? But you have to finish. And at the end, some are bloody, right? Like, it's just bad. And you can't have this model of how you approach deployments in the cloud in the same way that you were doing from an on-premise world. So this is where we were in April of 2014 when we made the decision to transform. And that's why it was so important that we quickly decided how are we going to make our organization transform, because this is how everything operated. In the beginning of 2014, these are the different departments that we had in the company. Fairly typical. We had professional services, we had support, we had engineering and legal and IT, all the fairly typical things that you would see, right, in most software companies. All of them climbing that monument. What we learned pretty quickly was a couple things. The very first thing that we threw down, and was the hardest thing for people to grasp, and it's still really hard to this day, was that in an on-premise world, when you provide a toolkit, and you have a professional services team that is there to basically build you your dream messaging platform, and it can do whatever you want. That same model cannot hold true in a cloud world. You can only sell what's in the box. You have to have those efficiencies, because you're going to have a greater number of customers that are all using the service, and they can't all be what we like to call special snowflakes. So if they're all running the same code and there's one technical operations team that is monitoring and supporting all of them, if there are major differences between those deployments, then you're going to get lost very quickly and you're not going to have any operational gains for how you're running this. So Momentum, super powerful toolkit. You can do a ton with it, but customizing and streamlining don't go together. And so we really had to re-educate everyone to say, if it is not already in our box, then you can't sell it. And we are not going to customize it. We're not going to deploy code that's custom in their environment because it's not safe and secure. Now, I will tell you that we did. We certainly did have a bunch of special snowflakes because it's really hard to go from never having a special, or from having all special snowflakes, because not a single one of our deployments in the field of Momentum looked like the other. There's always something different. And in the cloud, it took some time to go from having everybody being a special snowflake back to almost no one having a special snowflake. And the push there was really, how do we get there? We decided up front that we were going to, and really over time as well, we have weekly deployments to the cloud, to our public cloud, and that could someday move to daily or even more frequently, like some of our partners, like Etsy, I know, deploys multi-daily. And we have monthly deployments to Elite. And we figured a month is a long enough time that we can hold off those poor saps in sales and their customers and tell them, can you just wait a month? Or whatever time that we've committed to. But we're not going to do anything out of ordinary to put that into your environment right now, even though it could be scripted, even though somebody might have done it before and there's some special box somewhere that somebody did something rogue, and we could technically do it, we're not going to. And we're all hold firm to that. And that was really, really difficult to get people to agree to. It was the, whoa, I'm going to lose this deal because of that. No, you just have to learn how to say no better. You can't be that parent that gives in to everything. And there's soft skills of how to challenge and to, how to really say, well, I know you're asking for this thing over here, but we have this thing over here that does it this other way, and it solves your business need. So let's just do that first and then see if you really need this other thing. And so that has been a continuous challenge since day one, where we said, sell what's in the box. Sell what's in the box. We still work on that to this day, but we have solved it in great detail, or much greater, because we are doing those quicker deployments. We do get ahead of sales cycles. We do work with our customers and train people from our technical operations team or technical account team to say, what is it really the problem that you're trying to solve? Which all of those things are really necessary to not having special snowflakes. Because I can tell you, the special snowflakes that we did have for some time caused major issues when we were doing deployments. Some Puppet configuration would get messed up, and whatever their special configuration was wouldn't get turned on in their environment, or it would get deployed to other people's environments. And that's not good. So you want to remove all of those things, all of those risks, because you have so many more customers to serve. So some time goes on, and this is my friend Fald Albert. I have a major love of Annapolis and the Naval Academy. It'll become even more evident soon. This is Fald Albert. She is the C-130 that flies in front of the Blue Angels flight demonstration shows. And when I see Fald Albert, she reminds me of where we were in November of last year. How it felt to like sort of be off the ground. We're not really going very fast, but we're there. We totally got off the runway. And people are like, ooh, look at this. She does like these incredible tricks in this old C-130. But the also interesting part of this is what you don't see inside. One, it has the first female pilot of Blue Angels of all time flying it. Her name is Katie Higgins. But two, that the important part of Fald Albert here is that she brings all of the necessary tools, equipment, and personnel to run their operations. So while she's not fast and speedy, while she's not the thing that everybody is really there to see at the end of the day, she's the most critical part of the show because she brings everything else that's necessary to make that thing happen. And so this is where we were in November when we launched in beta, when we said, please come in our doors and try us out. And we got spammers and we got fishers on our public cloud offering. And we also got on our private cloud offering, some big name customers where we were just working through it. It was going slower than anybody would have liked, but we were there and they were willing to work with us. They knew where we were in our stage, but they also knew who we were and what we represented. And so they were coming along with us on this ride in this C-130 with us to see the show and to be part of the experience. So at the same time, so if you remember where we were in April of 2014, by this time, in November of 2014, we had the same groups, but we also had a few others. I think this is going to cut off. So we had a dedicated Spark Post engineering team. A core group of engineers from the engineering team had been broken apart to focus solely on going to the cloud. Not everybody. Remember, we were all in, except we weren't. We had a small group of people from engineering working on it. We also had, and you can't see that there, but we also included compliance and deliverability, right? Because part of messaging is making sure that you're doing the right things to get to the inbox, you're following best practices, you're following the standards. And from a compliance standpoint, we really wanted to protect our infrastructure, we wanted to protect our reputation, and we wanted to protect our reputation in terms of our IPs, but also with the people in the field that we would need to talk to in case something went wrong. So we added 3 departments. There were definitely some major growth in the other departments. So sales and marketing had hired people that were specifically focused on the cloud. We had a big focus on really upping our game in terms of social media. We had a big focus on upping our game in terms of blogging, in terms of really getting out into the field and going to hackathons. We hired some additional people for sales, so we had inside sales reps. We had sales reps that were really focused on just cold calling and bringing in these people that were just going to be focused on the cloud. And they were distinctly different than the people that were working on the on-premise side of the world because we still wanted them to focus on their charter. We still had a business to run. They still represent a great deal of our revenue and bookings. So that was November. C-130, Fald Albert is running through. But we started having some challenges in terms of, and you can't see the top of that, but we had an identity crisis, right? Who were we? We'd separated some things. We'd said we were all in, but really only certain people were all in. And the rah-rah spirit from April of the previous year had really transitioned to, yeah, those guys get to work on the cool stuff, but I'm still working on this other thing over here. And where do those two things merge? And how do we find the efficiency? Where am I in SparkPost? Because I'm not feeling it, right? And from our customers, sort of the same thing. Remember, we had 15 years, not always as message systems, but we had 15 years of customers with our product in their hands, that they'd paid a lot of money, both in actual revenue and in blood, sweat, and tears and time in putting into momentum. And they were concerned, right? Are you going to the cloud or are you going to abandon us? Where's the focus on the things that we need? Because there are still major things that are being asked from different variations of customers that we have. So there was definitely an identity crisis that we were going through. And how we solve that, and we continue to solve that, this is one of those things that is sort of nuanced. You can't make huge changes all up front because you don't want to pivot hard or throw the baby out with the bathwater, whatever, whatever metaphor you want to use in that regards. But the first thing was, all right, we got to collapse those teams again, right? We have to all be singularly focused. From my standpoint, as product manager, I had 3 different backlogs with product managers that are working on all of them and trying to talk to all of the same resource pool to get their thing to get priority. And here we have, we are cloud first, but we also have a bunch of customers that need these other things. So it became very difficult to manage, very difficult for engineering to determine what's the real priority here. So from a product standpoint, we created a single backlog, prioritized everything in there, and we do it in a very measured and focused way. What is the critical need here? We look at revenue. We look at the breadth of people that are going to benefit from the things that we do. And some things are quicker than others. It's not a perfect model, but it's definitely better than where we were when we started with having multiple different backlogs. We collapsed the engineering teams again so that everybody was working from that single backlog, right? They didn't all have multiple different focuses to look for. They weren't ever confused. I won't say ever. There was much less confusion on what it is that was the priority and why. And then we started talking with people and said, I know you're primarily focused on still servicing our on-premise market. For instance, our professional services team was like, hold up. You said we are all into being cloud first and said that there is nothing that can go into that box that is different than a special snowflake, and all I do is special snowflakes. And I do it really well, right? We've built our business on being able to do those things really well. So where in the world am I going to go in this new structure? And so we had to talk through those things and say, what is it that you want to do? And in some regards, it's, by the way, we did not forget about our on-premise customers. We are not abandoning that. And so we had to remind ourselves internally that cloud first is not cloud only, that our on-premise business is still important to us, and really be able to show people where the priorities are and where revenue comes from, where we think we're strategically going in a couple of years, and not just that push for the first year. So we knew that we needed to continue to focus on the charter that was in front of us to be cloud first. But we also recognized that to do that, we had to have the efficiencies from the learnings that everybody in the company had of building and supporting that software over time. So we decoupled those groups and brought them back together, and then brought back the backlogs as well. And this is where I like to say that unmaking decisions is okay, right? And a lot around the identity crisis as well. When you are looking so far ahead and saying, this is where we want to be, and this is who we're going to be. When you make that decision and you lay out those milestones are a guess. You should hold very firm, unless there is some earth-shattering reason to change this or stop this, to who you want to be at the end of this road, right? But how you get there, that can change a little bit. The timing that gets there can change a little bit. So we had to make those decisions of bring back those teams, bring back the code base. In August of last year, we'd separated the code base thinking, all right, we need to get SparkPost out quickly. The best way to do that with our small team is to not have to focus on the other teams, supporting this or testing it for on-premise customers. So we were just going to split these binaries, and we're going to have 2. No. Brought them back together. Still bringing them back together, almost done. And while it served a purpose at a time, we can't really quantify how much time was lost or gained from that decision, but long term, that was not the right decision for us to go. So it worked then to a point, and we decided collectively that's not the right way for us to go, and we made that decision, we moved forward. And it's not a blame game, it's not a, I can't believe you made that decision a long time ago. We collectively make decisions. It's a deciding the right thing to do at the moment, and then just moving forward. Always with the focus of where are we going and who do we want to be? And that's why that's great that that's the easiest thing. Who are we and where do we want to go? So again, we had all the engineers working in next up order. That means they work on the backlog and say, what are the next things for me to work on? We reunified that code base. There's only a little bit left to do, which means our sparkpost.com, which is our public cloud, has the same code base as our private cloud, which has the same code base as our on-premise, offering. It's just different configuration options. That way we don't have to train a bunch of different people in different things, and there's no confusion about what's where and what's on what version or any of those things. It's much more efficient. And then we reorganized the customer-facing teams to be multifaceted. So like I said, we'd hired way more people for sales and marketing. We'd hired additional people in professional services that were specifically focused on the cloud, but they were just focused on the cloud. And we said, you know what? We have a lot of experience in supporting this technology. We should just repurpose it. And we should just use the learnings that we have, as well as the new people, because we're going to need those new people. But we should use those gains across the organization. So by April of this past year, on April 15th again, 2015, we really felt like we were flying. So these are the F-18 Blue Angels. They are what comes after Fat Albert in the Blue Angels air demonstration. They're one of my most favorite things to watch, and one of my children's least favorite things to watch, which is why they likely, it's lucky for them that they haven't been disowned, because I've tried to take them every year, and there are some videos of them like this, and I'm like, I don't love you anymore. Like, there is a boundary to that. In any case, the F-18 Blue Angels, super fast, right? Really impressive at what they do. They're flying around. But you know what about the Blue Angels that's really interesting and maybe a little bit scary? They have pieces fly off every once in a while. They're not perfect, right? They've had accidents. They've had issues go awry. They've had pilots not to be able to take off because there's an issue with one of their aircraft. But they keep things together. They work as a team. They work in unity. And when there is an issue, they all really close in and make sure that they are all working together on that same issue. They work well because they have that team of people and that team of technology and tools that came in Fat Albert, several months ahead of them, or in this case, they come 2 weeks ahead of time to prep the area, or 1 week ahead of time to prep the area. But all of that works together. And if you don't have those initial parts, you're never going to be able to operate this show. You're never going to be able to put it on so that it's a spectacular thing for people to see, but also safe and secure, and you're not doing it with just not caring about the risk at all. So I won't go over that too much. So again, in April of 2015, what did our organization look like? Well, we dropped that specific Spark Post engineering team. They went away. And we had compliance and deliverability. And I apologize that this has clipped some, but we included a group of technical account managers to work with our private cloud customers. They're really the project managers, support, first line, make you feel good, give you some extra, love and attention. They're the ones that are the face of our cloud service for our private cloud customers. And they're really exceptional at what they do. They're the subject matter experts. And if I ever have a question or a concern around what's really the right way to go here, they're the first guys that I go and talk to. We added, and you can't see it, but technical operations joined us really as an official thing in the beginning of November. So remember, we launched beta in November without a full technical operations team in place. We had some people that were doing some remote management for us, but it was not a full-fledged adoption of we need this thing. And so we said, we need this thing. And when we hired the person to run it, we were like, oh, God, thank you. Where have you been all of our lives? And he had really great ideas. And he was the one that challenged us from a business standpoint to say, don't release in February. There were some other things that went on there, but we really needed to protect ourselves. We really needed to have some other things in place that maybe we wouldn't have thought about because we'd never run our software like that before. Certainly we've run it in the labs. Certainly we support it, but never at scale, right? We also recently added a deployment automation team. So there's a little bit of a game that goes on in your head, especially in engineering. And I started off in engineering, so while I'm a product manager, I'm a little bit technical, not fully technical, so I'm like mid-technical. There's a game of I did everything that you asked me to do, now I'm going to move it over here, whether that's for training or documentation, now it's your job to handle those things. And that's sort of always nuanced in any software company that I've been in. That was really never more true in my mind than in the who deploys this stuff to the cloud when we have updates. It's awesome. Let's deploy every week. Let's deploy every day. Said the person who was like, that shouldn't be a problem, right? Until you go to do it. And if you've never done it before, you're like, did somebody think about a rollback script? Did somebody think about when this goes bad? And whose job is it to monitor that and take care of that? And so that passed back and forth for a little bit. right? We always made sure that things were up, but people may work extremely long hours and then drink heavily after that happened. But we decided we really need a core focus, just like we did with technical operations, to make sure everything was up and running and being monitored, on deployment automation actually being a core component of what we do. And really eating your own dog food of like, hey, this installer works in this way, maybe it's not that great, maybe we need to make some changes here so we can protect our customers on premise as well, because they want to upgrade, but they're scared and they're back on that version from 7 years ago, and I'm sitting there slack-jawed and wondering, like, what have I done wrong in my life? So the deployment automation team has really bolstered our ability to deploy safely, more frequently, get updates out to our customers much quicker and much more efficiently. Recently, we've also added security, a real focus on security to our organization. So we have some customers that are in the financial sector that have asked us some tough questions about how are you going to protect my data? We don't keep any of the data, it just passes through our system, and they're like, yeah, I don't care about that, how are you going to protect my data? So even with that cognitive disconnect, we recognized that we really needed to put a focus on security as well and have somebody inside the organization that said, these are the things that we need to do to protect ourselves and protect our customers way more. So over the course of a year, we grew about 70 people. So we went from a company that had about 130 employees to a company that had about 200 employees in the span of a year. And we added a great number of departments as well. That's a lot of change. Not to mention, we also deployed 2 products to the cloud. So there's certainly a lot of things that we learned over that period, some of the things that I've gone through. One of the other big things, and this is still a challenge that we're working through, is risk aversion. So when you've never done this before, and when all you've ever done is deploy on premise, where you're like, I'm not letting this baby out of the house until it's like 25, and then maybe it'll be ready to go to school and ride a 2-wheel bike. Right? That's how we feel about on-premise deployments. We want it to be rock solid. In the cloud, you can't do that. You have to let it go. You have to let it be free to break down and fix it behind the scenes when nobody's looking, right? As long as the stuff on the front works and it's that duck that's on the water just swimming happily away, who cares what's happening beneath? Our customers don't. So we have to be less risk averse. But that's really hard paradigm shift for people who have been told for years and years and years, like, don't let that out. Don't mess it up, because like the worst thing you can do is roll out a GA release and then have to pull it back and explain that to people. So we brought the single code base. It gets tested numerous ways, but it gets proved out in our public cloud offering. It gets proved out in our elite offering, where it's getting a lot more volume and a lot more intense use of it. And then we can roll that to our on-premise customers so people are a little bit more comfortable letting things go. We took that focus of technical operations and brought in somebody from a security standpoint to tell us the things that we really do need to be concerned about and the things that maybe aren't so important. And we have monitoring and alerting and automation in place, maybe not to the degree that everybody would want for all time, but that's actually a product, right? Like, that is not something that just happens magically. You have to put focus and intent towards it. What we have in place right now is working really well, right? And so we want to test it. We want to push those boundaries and learn what other things that we need to be doing. And then just a mental shift to say, like, there are bad guys out there, and we want to catch them. So let's let the bad guys in the door a little bit and then shut them down, as opposed to not letting anybody in the door and not having a business. Because that is the risk that you take if you're so averse to risk, right? Is making it so hard for people to do business with you that no one wants to do business with you, let alone, the good guys or the bad guys. And finally, the last lesson that I think, apologies, this cut it off again, is really listen to the feedback. In an on-premise world, you get your feedback through support tickets, escalations, you go out and do account reviews. It's very much a slugfest to get that information, and a lot of times it's not provided in a happy way. When you're doing it for a cloud and you own that data, right, you can absolutely use the data, but you have to listen to it. And that's probably the biggest mental shift from a product management standpoint that we've had to make, is say, we actually have the data. Let's not just use opinions, because opinions is how a lot of things get built, right? You have some executive that says, I want this thing. And this thing seems really compelling, so go out and build me that thing. And you do, because who likes to fight with them on that, at least every single day around those things? And a lot of times it works out well. They're executives for a reason. In a cloud-based environment, you have data, so much data, that you really should be listening to it. So get it all. get everything that you can possibly get your hands on. But don't make the mistake that you can't start listening to the data until you get it all, because then you'll never start asking it the right questions, right? You want to get as much data as you can, but you want to be asking it certain questions, right? So don't try to go and get everything first and then worry about asking it questions. Ask it the question that you want the answer to, and if the data isn't there, go out and get some additional data, and then continue to listen to those things. So we're doing that in terms of that risk aversion that I was just talking about. We just made the decision to listen to it and make it easier to work with us and for us to be less risk averse. So in wrapping up, transforming this business over the last year and a half now has taken commitment from all levels. It hasn't been smooth sailing every day, but we really have been committed 100% to being all in, to making that sales and marketing, to engineering and support, that you really need everyone to be committed to that. And the second thing is know who you are and where you want to be, but be flexible about how you get there. Be open to changing decisions that you've made. Don't be so conceited or concerned that someone will think that you don't know what you're talking about. If you have to undo a decision that you made, that is the most powerful thing that you can get caught up in this. Standing at the forefront of making it happen. And there's a lot of people on the backside that are making it happen as well. And so one of the things that I think is most compelling to do, and this isn't just during transformation, but really at any time, is to recognize all the efforts of the people that are really making this change happen. Because it's happened, we're going to be all night trying to figure out how to actually get there. So really recognizing their efforts and making sure that they're committed and understanding if they think that we've made a bad decision in some part along the way, how to make changes. Yeah.
So your on-premise solution would have been designed for one user, one company. In a cloud situation, you're usually having the same installed instance serving multiple.
Mm-hmm.
So was there a significant engineering effort around making your application multi-tenant capable, or was that at all an issue in what you were doing?
The joint answer there is yes. So our software, our on-premise software, already did have customers that were servicing it themselves in a multi-tenant way. There's definitely tools that they have built on top of to be able to do that, and I could go into the details, but it was available. Now, we did have to make a considerable effort and changes to make multi-tenancy a first-class citizen to be able to really support having multiple customers in the same install base. So we could have done it in the way that we basically built on top of our platform that was already there, that was already enabled in multiple install bases to be able to do that. But we did have to put that focus there. Yeah. So what he asked was, in an on-premise basis, you're typically servicing one customer, and then in a cloud basis, you're typically servicing, hopefully, more than one customer. So you have one install with multiple customers, multi-tenant, and how do we go about that process? And my answer really being that it was there before, but we put focus and effort and productization into making that first class. Yeah.
So with changing the direction of the shift to
Yeah.
this magnitude, was there, and I ask because we're going through something similar, was there a perceivable uptick in attrition?
No. Pretty candid. We'd had that it was hard, and that's why we were making the decision of, we had a lot of competitors in the market that were, doing these things, doing them in the cloud. We had basically saturated our market, and so people were starting to say, where's the direction? That's why the last point that I already put, what you're doing here, you're not always going to get it right. It's really important for senior managers, mid-level managers, peers to talk to each other and say, how are things going? How are you feeling about this? And to really listen and take that feedback in. And it may be simply I hear what you're saying and I know that you're not comfortable with this thing. We're still going in this direction, but it doesn't mean I don't value what you said. So that's a really important part of it, is really, really that they want to go. Anybody else?
Driving force for this transformation. Was it marketing, product, or engineering?
Sure.
Secondly, where do you find product people with as much insight and passion for this type of process?
You mean people that, like me, that I have a background in technology and math, and again, if you're aiming to get them to really listen and understand and hear that feedback. So I think it's just a conversation. To the same thing I said over there, my thing is having great relationships with engineering. We're not always going to, that's the most important part. Regardless of what we went in there, the question around what was the catalyst for the shift, We had a new CEO join us, right? And it was really get ready for that because we have capabilities to do that, but building in Momentum capabilities, the API layer, REST layer, being able to do that, and additional analytics. And if we need one focus, we need one direction. Thank you very much.